Now let's solve move zeros. In this problem, we're given an array nums, obviously filled with numbers, and this array may contain zeros. If it does contain zeros, we need to move them to the end and return the array in the same order with the zeros at the far end. So input nums is equal to 0, 1, 0, 3, 12. We put the zeros in the end, and we return the array. And we return how the order of the numbers would look like without the zeros between them. So 1, then 3, then 12, then 0, and then 0. So the way we're going to solve this is we're going to create two pointers, int I, which is equal to 0, which is going to point at the first element in our nums array, and int y, which is equal to 1, which points to the next element or the second element in our nums array. And notice in the method above, it's void, meaning in this problem we do not need to return anything, we just need to modify the array. So now with these two pointers established, I'm going to loop through our array, and I'm going to loop through the array using a while loop, and we're going to say while y is less than nums.length. Since y is ahead of I, so we want to make sure y doesn't exit or check for numbers that are outside the bounds of the array. Now within our while loop, we're going to have some if statements. We're going to check if nums at I is equal to 0. But at the same time, we want to check if nums at y is not equal to 0. So I'm saying if nums at I is equal to 0, if nums at I is equal to 0, and if nums at y is not equal to 0, what are we going to do? We're going to swap these two numbers. So the 0 will be positioned where the 1 is, and the 1 will be positioned where the 0 is. If nums at I is equal to 0 and nums at y is not equal to 0, then create an int temp which stores the contents of nums at y. Then nums at y is going to be equal to nums at I, and then nums at I is going to be equal to temp. So now we swap them, and after we swap them we have to increment our I so we can look at the next variable, and also we have to increment our y, but I'm not going to do it in this statement. So the other if condition we need to check, so else if, we need to check if the nums at I, the number that we're currently on, is not equal to 0 if it's any other number. So if nums at I is not equal to 0, then simply all we have to do is increment I. We don't need to swap anything, we just need to look at the next element. Finally, after we check both of these if conditions, regardless if these if conditions are passed or failed, we're going to increment y to look at the next variable. So let's submit our code now and see if it works. There we go. So let's go through a quick case to see the functionality of our code. So we have this nums array. So while y is less than nums.length, obviously y is pointing at 1 and I is pointing at 0. If nums at I is equal to 0, yes it is, and nums at y is not equal to 0, it's not, we're going to swap these two variables. So now we'd have the 1 here and then the 0, so our array would look like this. It would look something like this. And after we swap them, we incremented I, so now I is pointing here. And after we exit this if statement, we increment y, so y is now pointing at this 0. So now we have I pointing at the first 0 and y pointing at the second 0. Once again, we go through our while loop. If nums at I is equal to 0, it is, and nums at y is not equal to 0. In this case, it is equal to 0, so we're not going to read this if statement. Else, if nums at I is not equal to 0, unfortunately it is 0, so we're also going to skip this. So all we're going to do is we're going to increment y. So our I still points to this 0, and now our y points to this 3. We go back to our while loop. Now, since nums at I is 0 and nums at y is not equal to 0, we can swap them. So our array will look like this, something like this. And then we increment I, so now our I is pointing here. And after we exit our else or if statements, our y is going to point to 12. And one more time, if nums at I is equal to 0, it is, and nums at y is not equal to 0, it's not, it's 12. We swap them, so our final array will look like this. And then after leaving our if statement, we incremented I, doesn't really matter. We incremented y again, so now y is pointing to something outside the array. We're going to go back to our while statement, and since y is not less than nums.length, we exit our while statement, and that's our array sorted. Like I said, this is a void method, so we do not need to return anything. And so That was the move zeros problem on LeetCode. I hope you found that video helpful, and thanks for watching.